Welcome back to the program. Great to have you with me as always. Click that subscribe button if you haven't already. Like the video, tell your friends and family to do the same. Click the bell for notifications. I appreciate the support. Checking in a few things that have got my attention over the weekend since I last spoke with you on Thursday. President Trump must be having an anxious, restless weekend as D-Day approaches. Tomorrow, the 25th, is when his deadline reaches for paying off his fine for being found guilty in a civil fraud case with respect to overvaluing his property in a loan agreement with Deutsche Bank. This is the case where no one was harmed, no one lost money, no one was hurt, yet Letitia James went after President Trump with the help of a goofy, very elderly judge, Arthur Engoron, and he has to pay up $450 million-ish. U.S. Constitution says there should not be excessive fines. The basis of this case seems a bit fugazi, and it's completely reasonable to think this will be overturned in appeal, and it might even reach the Supreme Court. But given the unusual law under which Letitia James went after Trump here, which is a consumer law, by the way, trying to protect consumers from being hurt by corporations, in order to appeal, you first have to pay the fraud case amount. Found guilty, pay the fine, then you can appeal. So very unusual. And tomorrow's the day. And it's got to be a bit embarrassing for Donald Trump. Remember now, for decades and decades, he's been bragging about his wealth. He has gone to court and sued people who undercounted his wealth in his estimation. He's claimed to be as wealthy as $10 billion not that long ago. A guy worth that kind of money, billions of dollars, shouldn't have too much trouble coming up with $450 million. Now, this is obviously a question of liquidity, how close assets are to cash. And it appears either Donald Trump doesn't have a lot of assets or he doesn't have a lot of liquid assets. He has an impressive real estate portfolio, doesn't seem to have a huge stock portfolio that he can liquidate. And so he claims as of yesterday that he has $500 million in cash that he can use to pay the fine, but doesn't want to. And so we're seeing lots of talk about Letitia James seizing Trump assets. He has a lot of real estate assets in New York State, and some of the prominent properties that have been talked about already are Seven Springs and Trump National Golf Club in Westchester. Also Trump Tower, his property on Wall Street. Well, commercial real estate, of course, is in real jeopardy, and no one's going to lend money against commercial real estate. Anyway, it looks like he may not come up with his cash, and he's going to have to if he wants to appeal. But the idea of Letitia James just seizing Trump property is probably not going to be as easy as it sounds. You can be sure that there's unique legal arrangements for his ownership of certain assets, and that he's likely to have partners involved in these assets, or there's likely to be leveraged debt related to these assets. So it's not just Letitia James against Donald Trump. It's Letitia James against Trump and any partners that he has, or any lenders that he has out there. So it's not like she's going to be able to walk into some building tomorrow and put some locks on the doors and say, we control the Trump asset. She will be pulled into court by other parties. And so this isn't going to be an overnight event. Moreover, to the extent she becomes aggressive in trying to seize these properties in a way that's less than legal, then she's going to be hurting the value of these properties. I'm not sure that's a big concern for her, but that's likely to be the outcome. So an anxious weekend for the former president has to be a tremendous mental distraction from his efforts to campaign, which of course is part of the reason why Democrats went after him in such an aggressive way legally, and certainly in this case to be sure. So when he gets through this somehow in the next few days here and gets to an appellate court, I think this is reversed, or certainly the level of fines dropped. And for our constitutional scholars out there, we want to remind ourselves of the Eighth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. Excessive bail should not be required, nor excessive fines imposed, nor cruel and unusual punishments inflicted. Seems very obvious if he can get through this process, somehow find a way to pay this fine or get a bond or get someone helping to pay this fine, it's likely that this case gets overruled. Of course, Trump could be saved in not too long of a time by a SPAC through Trump Media and Technology Group and his social media platform, True Social. Digital World Acquisition Corporation voted in favor of the deal on Friday that allows the merger of Digital World Acquisition Corporation and Trump Media and Technology Group, which holds True Social. And they're valuing this deal somewhere around, for Trump, $3.3 billion. SPAC is a special purpose acquisition company. Came into the public sphere very obviously in the past few years. There's nothing guaranteed here because there's still some legal issues going on between the companies with respect to past business associates and what share count they get. And there's some discussion about that. But this is fugazi financing. This is get rich quick stuff. If you think about this, in just six or 7 years, a company that didn't exist is going to be valued at billions of dollars, and Donald Trump's going to cash out for $3.5 billion. Remember, now this is all driven by the fact that Twitter and YouTube and a bunch of social media platforms kicked Donald Trump off their platforms and gave him no way to speak to the public in a way he enjoyed. And so he started his own platform, Truth Social, through the parent company, Trump Media and Technology Group. For 2023, the social media company lost $10.6 million, had revenue of $3.4 million, funds itself through borrowing on a regular basis, and somehow TMTG is going to be valued at $5.7 billion in the merger with Digital World. This windfall will certainly help President Trump sort out his fines with New York State, although timing is a bit problematic. Truth Social has 8.9 million signups. X has over 500 million. And Trump will get between 58 to 69% of the combined company. Two of the men that helped launch this TMTG were former Trump reality TV stars on The Apprentice. So nice if you can get it, but boy, oh boy, nothing's been created. Nothing's been produced. Doesn't have a lot of traction compared to other social media platforms, but somehow he might cash out for $3.5 billion. Now, you want to know what's wrong in the world? There's a good example of what's wrong in the world: SPACs. All right, so let's move on to another topic of discussion, and that is the ongoing angst on the part of the mainstream media, so Democrat media, and Democrats politically around the country, about how President Biden can't get any traction on what they claim to be this wonderful economy, and that it's a lack of people paying attention, being too busy for the majority of Americans to notice that what President Biden has done the past 3 years has been nothing but the best ever in American history. And they just scratch their heads. Why? GDP is okay. Unemployment is relatively low. Consumer sentiment, not bad. Elevated over the past few months. Still well below December 2019, but not bad. High level of imports. I'm sure in your own world it's busy out there. There's lots of nice cars on the road. There's people at restaurants, even though prices are up. But the underlying data is not good. When you dig into the data, it's not good. People that are worried about this issue, why President Biden isn't getting more credit for what they claim to be a great economy, is that it's really not. There's lots of troubles out there confronting Americans, not least of all is inflation. And while Democrats want you to think that prices are falling, it's really not the case. Some prices are falling a little bit, but the overall price level of the typical basket of goods and services consumed by the average American is not falling. And that price level for that basket of goods and services is up about 20% since January of 2021. And it's not going down. And inflation is still rising. First derivative is still positive. Second derivative is negative, rising at a decreasing rate for sure. The unemployment rate, yes, low, but you look at the U6 rate, the broader measure of unemployment, 7.4%. And the bottom line is this unemployment rate is driven by part-time jobs. The majority of jobs created in the past 2 years have been part-time jobs. In the past year, no full-time jobs have been created on a net basis. And moreover, GDP by itself, C plus I plus G plus X minus M, right? That's our GDP equation, the expenditure method. Consumption plus gross domestic investment plus government spending plus net exports is the value of total output in the economy, a measure of income in the economy. Remember, what is produced must be bought and vice versa. What's left over is inventories as part of investment. But let's just take a look at Q4 GDP for 2023. Q4 GDP was up about 3% on an annualized basis. So Q4 GDP increased by $334.5 billion to take nominal GDP, current dollar GDP, to $27.9 trillion. A massive number, very, very impressive number. So considering Q4 GDP up 334.5 billion or 3% annualized, let's use a little lag effect. And let's recognize that when it comes to government spending, there's a little bit of a lag effect. So let's use Q3 government spending as a measure for Q4 GDP. So a little lag effect there. Because consumption is relatively flat, investment is relatively flat, and net exports are relatively flat in terms of changes quarter to quarter. So to get that $334.5 billion increase in nominal GDP, it was the $600 billion in government deficit spending that pushed the economy higher in Q4. So it took us $600 billion in debt to get $334.5 billion in increased GDP. Not a good trade-off and certainly not sustainable. For the whole year of 2023, GDP was up $1.61 trillion, but total government debt went up by $2.4 trillion. And people can see this. People can feel this. And that debt's going to have to be repaid. And so to the extent we're enjoying decent economic activity, it's driven by debt. Consumer debt, business debt, and most importantly, government debt. Moreover, when you think of other reasons people might be concerned about the economy or not feeling as good as Joe Biden thinks they should be, is because of healthcare, the cost of healthcare, the cost of insurance. The anxiety people have of getting sick because they can't afford the medical care, even though they have insurance. Insurance premiums are high, deductibles are high, medical costs are skyrocketing. Insurance costs generally across the board are up. Home insurance, life insurance, medical insurance, repair costs from automobiles are up. In the sense that people have that we're being forced to consume in ways that we don't like, that we're not used to. And we think about this, the push for electric vehicles by the Biden administration. A little insight into why some people may not be as happy with the economy as Joe Biden says they should be. And another reason, how about our next topic? How about another reason? How about the anxiety of being a homeowner of more than one or two properties, or in one property you're not living in? Have you seen this dramatic increase in the efforts to squat in other people's property? A TikTok video from one of our recent guests coming across the southern border from Venezuela is shouting out on TikTok, telling other illegal immigrants how to squat on people's property. Something that's taken off dramatically in Atlanta. And so we had an example here in the Northeast last week. A woman on Long Island was arrested at her own home for trying to get squatters out of her home. In Atlanta, the problem is so bad, some residents are afraid to go on vacation. And here is another example. When we think of student loan forgiveness, when we think of property crimes like this, squatting, it takes us to an important element of capitalism, and that is contracts and the enforcement of contracts by a governing body. And without the enforcement of contracts, rule of law breaks down. And so now we have all these videos out on the social media platforms advising people how to do it, how to be a squatter. And it's not the easiest way to go, but it's a cheap way to go. They look for sale or rent signs on a property with a phone number attached. Call the number. If they don't get a response over a certain period of time, maybe that's a possible home to squat in. They look through Zillow and Trulia for homes that have been on the market for extended period of times without any activity. Some squatters say place a cone in their driveway, and if in a few days they don't move the cone, that means no one's there. It's all yours. We see this increasingly happening in Beverly Hills. We have laws on the books in every state that allow for this to happen. That is to say, give more rights to the squatter than the actual homeowner who can prove they're the homeowner. The proper legal term for this is adverse possession. The rules differ from state to state. But if someone who doesn't own the property lives in that property for a minimum number of days, they essentially get ownership control. So really bad news for a housing market that can't afford this type of crap. And it might be easier as more and more of our homes are owned by corporate owners, which we've talked about a few times on the show. But boy, oh boy, imagine you're an owner of a property. You leave your property for a short period of time, say a month or two. Squatters take over your property and they can control your property because the law allows it. Just horrible, horrible. Right now, every state legislator in the country should be writing laws that ends the rights of squatters. Squatters have no rights, period. Easy solution. It won't happen because it's too easy and too obvious. We have to be concerned about the squatters, the poor squatters. No, squatters get no attention here. They're out. I saw over the weekend the horrific attacks in Moscow by some ISIS-K terrorists, K referring to Afghanistan, at the Crocus City Hall music venue in western Moscow. About 133 killed, although still sorting through the chaos of the fire. Remember, the terrorists lit a massive fire inside the structure, and the structure burned down after the killings. 11 people have been detained so far. The 4 shooters have apparently been caught, have been interrogated. There's some videos out there already about these people being interrogated. And horrible, just devastating. And that's something we have to be deeply concerned about here in the U.S. We've had an open border now for over 3 years. We have no idea who's come across the border. And so this is going to be a real risk for America for many years to come now. It was driven by the desire to kill Christians. Russia and the U.S. has been hammering ISIS for many years now in Syria, weakening them across the board. What concerns me is President Putin's response and the very emphatic statement he made about these terrorists were making their way out of Russia through Ukraine, and that there were people that were supporting them to get into Russia and out of Russia in Ukraine. Now, one of the things that Russia has a problem with is the cry wolf problem. Russia has used false flags attacks domestically in their own economy, in their own country before, in an effort to gain support from their citizenship to engage in warfare in the Caucasus. And it's hard for anyone who observes these things regularly, who pays attention to these things, to not immediately think that this could be a false flag event, horrific as it is. I want to put it down the list for sure, but it's something that's on the list. And to the extent that President Putin is blaming Ukraine, that causes me to think more of that potential issue, the false flag event. Because what the president will be trying to do is incite more support from the Russian people in its efforts to take out Ukraine in the war that's ongoing daily. Other nations have done this. America's been accused of doing this in the past. This reminds me of the Gulf of Tonkin incident in 1964 that helped motivate Americans to be more interested in sending forces to Vietnam to fight the communists there. Those that are caught by Russia in connection with this attack are going to be in hell. Russia does not screw around with these things. Again, they've already captured the 4 shooters, apparently. There's pictures and video of them online. And we just have to hope that President Putin doesn't push this Ukraine issue, because if he pushes Ukraine, it's going to be the U.S. as well. As the cause of this, the louder he is about pushing it against Ukraine, the more we'll know it might be a false flag attack. But just horrific. Have to feel badly for the Russians and all those killed and their families. Well, our U.S. Congress at it again, failing in their jobs. Congress is a joke, honestly. Politicians generally across the country are a joke. They don't solve problems anymore. It's become a venue for fame and wealth. Fame and fortune seems to be the political train now, rather than actually caring about service and helping out your fellow citizens. So over the weekend, Friday, Saturday, the U.S. Congress, first the House on Friday, then the Senate on Saturday, passed the $1.2 trillion budget for the rest of the government through September. So what is that? October, November, December, January, February, March, about 6 months late. Doesn't cut spending at all. They call it bipartisan because Republicans supported it. Continuation of the spending we saw from the Pelosi and Schumer years. House voted 286 to 134. 23 Democrats, 112 Republicans opposed the legislation. Mike Johnson, Speaker of the House, did not have the majority of his caucus on board. Not a good way to move forward. His job's likely in jeopardy now. They did stop funding the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestinian refugees. There was $200 million for a new FBI headquarters in Maryland, $1 billion increase for child care and Head Start programs, 2,000 additional Border Patrol agents and 8,000 new detention beds for Immigration and Customs Enforcement. What can I say? I've been watching this for decades now. It's the same old thing every year. More deficits, more debt, more of the same, more dysfunction, more waste of taxpayer dollars. And another example of the silliness that is our U.S. Congress. Full-time jobs, $175,000 a year, plus benefits, plus access to inside information for trading stocks. And they just can't do the job right. Dems win again, by the way. Dems win again, if that matters. All right, one more thing I'll note. President Biden continued to give away taxpayer dollars to buy votes here in 2024. So we give another $5.8 billion in student debt, 78,000 borrowers. Total relief now from student loans, $143.6 billion taxpayers going to pay. These are loans voluntarily taken out by individuals seeking education and agreeing to pay back those loans with the work they got from that education. This most recent round of forgiveness applies to teachers, nurses, and firefighters who, due to previous failures with the system, did not receive forgiveness they were promised for going into public service. Meanwhile, all those people, teachers, nurses, firefighters, guess what they also get? A nice, healthy pension when they're done their service for the rest of their life. So we're going to forgive their student loans and we're going to give you a pension. This takes us back to the idea of capitalism and contract law and the idea of enforcing contracts. The banks don't care. Government doesn't care. Taxpayers should care. But just more of the same, our broken student loan system. President Biden said in a statement, from day one, my administration, I promise to fix broken student loan programs and make sure higher education is a ticket to the middle class, not a barrier to opportunity. The broken student loan programs is Biden and Obama took it over in 2010. They're the ones that broke it. Make sure higher education is a ticket to the middle class. Well, it depends on what you study, what your major is. He says, I won't back down using every tool at my disposal to deliver student debt relief to more Americans. And by the way, highly inflationary. Anyway, pretty sad. All right, one last look at the economy. Spoke to you last on Thursday. We had no data on Friday. Let's take a look ahead this week for data that's coming up. On Monday, another housing data point, very important, something the Fed pays attention to, February new home sales. On Tuesday, we have durable goods orders for the month of February. Also on Tuesday, the Conference Board Consumer Confidence Index. Wednesday, it always at 7 a.m., MBA mortgage applications for the week ending March 23rd. On Thursday, as always, at 8:30, initial unemployment claims for the week ending March 23rd. It's a silly number now. It's been stuck in the low 200,000s for months and months and months. Something's fugazi in this data. Also, we get our final look at Q4 GDP, looking for unchanged from our prior look, 3.2%. Also, we have the March Chicago Purchasing Managers Index. And also on Thursday, February pending home sales, homes in contract waiting to go to closing. On Friday, it's Good Friday. So a lot going on. We do have the goods trade balance from the Census Bureau for the month of February. And Fed Chair Powell speaks on Friday as well. That's the data coming up for this week. Pay attention now. When we look at economic data, we're going to talk about market reaction. And market reaction is how they interpret the data will impact Fed decisions on interest rates. I have the Fed on hold their next meeting, March 30th, April 1st, and I have them on hold in a June meeting as well. All right, quick look at markets for the week ending the 22nd. S&P 500 off its highs for the week, closed at 5,234. Had a big leg up during the week on the back of Fed commentary. Dovish, Powell again, hawkish statement from the Fed, and then Dovish Powell in his press conference opened the week at 5,134, had a high at 5,258, closed at 5,234. Another up week for stocks. Checking on interest rates, we use a benchmark 10-year U.S. Treasury bond, closed the week at 4.20%, down 7 basis points on the week. Again, a dovish Fed chair in their comments on Wednesday. Opened the week at 4.31, had a high in the week of 4.33, closing near the lows of 4.20%. We need this 10-year above 4.5% for sure. There is talk that the Fed is going to raise its inflation target to 3.5% from 2%. That would be a huge mistake. Checking oil, West Texas Intermediate from the NYMEX closed the week at $80.82. Opened the week at $82, had a high in the week of $82.91. Had a low on Thursday around $80.63 and closed at $80.82. A little bit here. I think you're buying dips in oil. How about a quick segue here? We're talking about oil. For 2023, the United States produced more crude oil than any nation at any time, according from the U.S. Energy Information Administration. And by the way, this is 6 years in a row we produced the most oil than any other nation, but this is the most ever produced by a nation. Averaged 12.9 million barrels per day in 2023. Together with Russia and Saudi Arabia, the United States accounted for 40% of global oil production in 2023. Russia should be a concern. I remember we put sanctions on Russian oil so they would have a hard time fighting Ukraine. Yeah, what a joke. Thanks, India. Anyway, given all the efforts by the Biden administration to squash fossil fuels. He signed dozens and dozens of executive orders to make it harder to produce oil and gas. It's not working, and that's fantastic. Remember now, back in the 1970s, we were talking about peak oil. At the time, the United States was producing 9.6 million barrels per day. And now we're producing almost 13 million barrels per day. So much for peak oil. Hydraulic fracturing, of course, was a big change over that time period. All right, let's continue on with some other stuff. Checking on currencies, the US dollar index. Dollar's bid broke through that 103.90 level for the index, which had been a technical resistance point for some days. Opened the week at 103.91, had a low on the week of 103.43, had a high of 104.49 and closed at 104.43. Dollar strength across the board. That's on geopolitical concerns and technical trading, not driven by interest rates. Remember, the dollar sold off on Wednesday and Thursday, driven by dovish Powell comments. You can see dollar yen trading at 151.42, high for the week, and euro trading 108.10. Well, off the 109 level from earlier in the week we spoke about last week. And then lastly, we'll just check in on some commodities. Gold, near highs again, closed the week of 2,166, off the highs from Wednesday and Thursday of 2,213, and opened the week at around 2,161. So we're buying dips in gold. The Fed's going to turn its attention away from fighting inflation and buy gold. That's all I have for you today. Always try to buy American.